I had exactly 20 minutes before the Sirens would arrive to take him away. I stood at the edge of the Oakwood Cemetery, clutching a rusty shovel while a cold October rain began to turn the soil into a thick, black sludge. 5 meters away, a massive battle-scarred Pitbull stood his ground. His name was Ghost. He wasn't a stray in the traditional sense. He was a sentinel. For 3 long years, he had lived beside an unmarked grave in the back corner of the cemetery, a place where the grass never grew and the shadows seemed to linger even at noon. The city council had labeled him a public menace, and today the animal control vans were coming with tranquilizer darts and a one-way ticket to the shelter's high-kill row. But as I looked into Ghost's intelligent golden eyes, I didn't see aggression. I saw a desperate, agonizing plea for time. My name is Elias, and I've been the groundskeeper here for 15 years. I've seen grief in every form. The silent tears, the hysterical screams, the quiet flowers left on Sundays. But I had never seen anything like Ghost. He arrived 3 years ago on a night so foggy you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. He was emaciated, his ribs protruding like the hull of a wrecked ship, and his ears were tattered from years of what I suspected were illegal street fights. Most strays move on after a few days, driven by the search for food. Not Ghost. He took up residence at Plot 402, a patch of dirt that officially didn't exist in our records. I tried to feed him, leaving bowls of premium kibble and fresh water near the gate, but he would only eat if I turned my back. And even then, he never moved more than 10 feet from that specific spot. Over the years, we developed a silent understanding. I didn't report him, and he didn't growl when I mowed the nearby grass. But lately, Ghost had changed. He wasn't just sitting anymore, he was digging. It started a week ago. I arrived at dawn to find Ghost's paws covered in raw, bleeding sores. He had been clawing at the earth with a frantic, feverish energy. This wasn't a dog looking for a bone. This was a dog trying to exhume a secret. When I approached with a flashlight, Ghost did something he had never done before. He didn't retreat. He grabbed the hem of my work jacket with his teeth and gently, firmly pulled me toward the hole. The air in that corner of the cemetery felt heavy, metallic. As I shone the light into the shallow pit, I saw it, a flash of rusted steel. It wasn't a casket. It was an old industrial briefcase buried barely 3 feet down. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that Plot 402 was supposed to be empty. If there was a case there, it meant someone had been here in the dead of night, and Ghost had been the only witness to whatever sin they had committed. Just as my shovel hit the metal with a hollow clank, I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. A black sedan had pulled up to the cemetery gates. It wasn't animal control. It was a man I recognized from the front pages of the local news, Councilman Marcus Thorne. He was a man of power, of law and order. But as he stepped out of the car, his face was a mask of cold, calculated fury. Thorne didn't say a word at first. He just watched me from the iron fence, his eyes darting from the briefcase to the dog. Ghost began to emit a sound that made my blood turn to ice. A low, guttural vibration that wasn't a growl, but a funeral dirge. The dog's hackles were raised, his entire body trembling with a rage that had been bottled up for 3 years. "Elias," Thorne finally spoke, his voice smooth as silk, but twice as deadly. "You're working late, and you're digging in a place that doesn't belong to you. That dog is a stray. It needs to be put down for the safety of this community." I looked at Ghost, then back at the briefcase. "This dog isn't a menace, Councilman. He's a guardian. And I think you know exactly what he's been guarding." I reached down and gripped the handle of the briefcase. It was heavy, weighted down with more than just paper. In that moment, Thorne's composure shattered. He reached into his coat, and I saw the glint of a snub-nosed revolver. "Drop it, Elias. Step away from the hole, and maybe you walk out of here tonight." The world seemed to slow down. I was an old man with a shovel. He was a desperate man with a gun. But we both forgot about the third soul in the clearing. Ghost didn't wait for a command. He didn't wait for a gunshot. With a roar of pure, unadulterated justice, the Pitbull launched himself across the clearing. Thorne fired. The bullet hissed past my ear, thudding into an oak tree. But Ghost was already on him. The dog didn't aim for the throat. He aimed for the arm holding the weapon. I heard the sickening snap of bone and Thorne's scream echoing through the silent tombstones. The gun clattered to the grass. Ghost didn't tear or maul. He simply pinned Thorne to the ground, his massive jaws locked onto the councilman's sleeve, holding him in place with the strength of a titan. "Call them!" I yelled, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Call the police, not animal control." The sirens that arrived 20 minutes later weren't there for Ghost. They were for Thorne. When the detectives opened that briefcase, the pieces of a 3-year-old puzzle finally fell into place. Inside were the journals and hard drives of Sarah Miller, a young investigative journalist who had disappeared on a rainy night 3 years ago. She had been tracking Thorne's involvement in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. Ghost hadn't belonged to a fighter. He had belonged to Sarah. He was the only one who saw Thorne bury the evidence of his crimes that night. He was the only one who stayed behind to make sure her truth wasn't lost to the dirt. Thorne was led away in handcuffs, his career and his freedom over. But my focus was on Ghost. He sat quietly by the now open hole, his tail given a single weary wag. The detectives tried to approach him, but he only had eyes for me. Today, Plot 402 is no longer an unmarked grave. It is a small, beautiful memorial for Sarah Miller, paid for by the community that finally knows the truth. And if you visit on a sunny afternoon, you'll see a massive pit bull lying in the grass, his head resting on a marble slab. Ghost isn't a stray anymore. He lives with me at the lodge, and his belly is always full, his bed always warm. But every morning, at exactly 8 a.m., he walks to that back corner of the cemetery and sits. He taught me a lesson I will never forget. That loyalty isn't measured in words, but in the silence of the years. It is a bond that can't be broken by a bullet and a truth that can't be hidden by the earth. Because in the end, justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it has 4 paws, a scarred face, and a heart that refuses to forget.